Good morning. Thank you for tuning in to Voice of Reason Boston. Today we have a special guest, Mike Maloney. He will be giving us information about why he's running for the Suffolk County District Attorney's office. We'll be getting to know a little bit more about him today and what he's doing and what he has been doing in the community. And Michael, I want to thank you very much for coming in today. How are you?
Tamisha, thank you very much for having me. Junior, thank you very much for having me. I'm doing terrific, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come here, let your listeners know who I am, what my platform is, and what I stand for, and why I will be on the ballot on the November election.
That's awesome. We thank you for coming in. I can honestly tell you, Mike, I'm so glad you're here because I really didn't know too much about you before, but today we're going to nip that in the bud, and we're going to learn as much as we can from you. Can you just give us a little bit background history as far as where you're from, where did you grow up, and what your background is?
Absolutely. So I graduated Providence College in 2002. I went to King Philip High School. I graduated in 98. I graduated New England School of Law in 2006. Immediately after graduating, I hung out my own shingle, and I've been practicing criminal law as a defense attorney for over 10 years now. I've never been a prosecutor. Like I said, grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Plainville. I lived in and around Boston for my entire life. I've been a part of the community. I've been involved in the legal system and owned a number of small businesses. And when I saw an opportunity to get involved from more of a macro standpoint and really affect the criminal justice system, I threw my hat in. I got into the race a little bit late, but like I said, I'm here to tell you about what I stand for, why my background is unique, and why what I'm offering is much different than all the other candidates.
That's great. And how did you get into criminal law? What pushed you to become an attorney?
To put it totally out there, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I really I enjoy skydiving, bungee jumping, that kind of thing. And 10 years ago, my sole draw in was I was enthralled with the idea of impaneling a jury. I've been practicing, like I said, criminal law as a defense attorney for 10 years. I've handled a number of murder cases through misdemeanors and everything in between. But when I first got in, I was really drawn to the adrenaline. But as I've been practicing and as I've expanded and really learned the system and learn how the system is played and who it benefits, who it doesn't, I really started to grow fed up with what I've seen as a broken system. And I've been plucking individuals out through motions to suppress, motions to dismiss, exceptions to the rule, backdoors, loopholes, etc. for 10 years. And now, I'm really looking to affect the system to preclude the masses from going into the system. The system right now, right? Again, I'm a mass. I know your viewers don't know who I am, but let me just say again, I'm an independent. My name is Michael Maloney, and I am an incredibly strong proponent of criminal justice reform. When the adrenaline-laced cases, like I was talking about a few minutes ago, Tamisha, those are the exceptions.
Right.
The overwhelming majority of the cases that work their way through the criminal justice system are addicts. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The overwhelming majority are addicts. They're addicts that, truthfully, it's a societal problem. It really is a societal problem, but it gets shoved down the throat of the criminal justice system. And right now, the tough on drugs, the war on drugs approach is systematically repeating itself. It's a cycle of recidivism, and people that go into the system, they come out
back.
And then a year later,
they're back in the same position again.
Well, what would you expect, really? Again, I'm not any bleeding heart by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a pragmatic approach. But when you take someone who was already at their last rung, who wasn't addict, again, which is the majority of people who are incarcerated, they have drug problems, they have mental health issues, they get out, and now 9 times out of 10, they've lost their spouse. They've lost their children. DCF is involved, and their ability to create a resume or a CV like any of us would be able to do is shot because they come out of jail and they simply don't have the benefits or the opportunities or the know-how to actually
proper counseling to get them back into society.
So they end up back in the system, and people think oftentimes that if you take a tough on drugs approach, that's going to solve the problem. Listen, I'm a very aggressive individual by nature, and like I said, I'm approaching this with a pragmatic standpoint. And perhaps you don't want to go down too far this path right now, but I'm really bringing unique solutions. I'm the only individual that is fully in support of harm reduction zones. Harm reduction zones used in conjunction with other diversionary techniques are what will quell the recidivism, the cycle of recidivism.
Right.
And that's really why I am running.
Okay, that's great. And tell me, you mentioned that you're independent.
I am.
For those who are listening in and tuning in, can you tell us what independent means and why you chose that route to be independent?
Absolutely. So my name, Michael Maloney, will be listed as an independent reformer on the ballot in the general November election. When I was a kid, I say kid loosely, 18 through early 20s, I was a Democrat. I was a Republican for probably my late 20s, and I've been an independent since then. I think there are truly benefits that the Democratic Party brings, and there are truly, I grew up with a different Republican Party, but I certainly am a strong subscriber of small government. Socially, I fall very in line with the Democratic Party, but like I said, overall, I think the government should be much less involved in our day-to-day interaction. Specifically, drug usage. I'm also the only candidate running that supports not incarcerating, but not prosecuting non-violent drug offenses.
Okay.
Non-violent drug offenses, these problems don't affect white, black, or brown anymore, one group over the other.
Okay.
But there's a disproportionate number of minorities that are affected and brought into the system because of drug issues.
Okay, great. So what pushed you to be when, a lot of people, they come from college, they want the experience, they want, to be part of the criminal justice system. I know you said you're a defense attorney. Why not the prosecutor route? Like everybody, when they come from college, they would like to sit and be part of the prosecution. They want to prosecute. Why not wanting to be a prosecutor before becoming a defense attorney?
Well, there's a lot more ability to control the construct of the business as a defense attorney. And truly, I always like rooting for the underdog. There's a small part of me that just loves rooting for the underdog. And truth be told, I realize that coming in as the undeclared candidate, as the unenrolled candidate, I've already been precluded from participating in 4 separate debates.
Really?
I was actually invited and then subsequently disinvited in writing when they found out I was not a registered Democrat by both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. So I understand, there's a small part of me that just wants to root for the underdog. And I actually look at it as a significant benefit. There's a major, I think the general populace, I think the majority of Massachusetts and specifically Suffolk County constituents realize or are starting to appreciate, people that don't have their ear to the ground, Tamisha, they're starting to appreciate that criminal justice reform needs to happen because you cannot incarcerate your way out of this problem. You're not going to solve the epidemic, not just the opioid epidemic, but the drug addiction epidemic. You're not going to solve it by getting tougher and throwing more people in jail. It's not going to happen. So people realizing that, at least at a 30,000 foot view, a basic elementary level, again, people that are not involved in the judicial system, they're starting to realize that. And like I said, I am coming in with an incredibly aggressive, bold reform plan, including harm reduction zones and diversionary tactics across the board, that are going to reduce the rate of recidivism. I can also tell you that I'm the only candidate that will be implementing a 5-member panel. I'm going to actually ask Sheriff Tompkins to participate as one of these members. And they will be charged with resentencing and egregiously long sentences issued under the mandatory minimum statute, which is an absolute disaster. And I don't want to, I know I'm going a little bit back and forth here, Tamisha,
that's
but
fine.
Part of the reason that the minimum mandatories are a disaster is because they take away the ability of the judge, he or herself, their ability to gauge context in any given situation. And when there is when it's a drug case that is not violent, context is of the utmost importance.
So I know we talked about a number of things that you want to do if you were to become the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. What kind of cases have you been handling, and what is the number one need for some of the plans that you have in place?
Well, like I said, I've been handling misdemeanors through life sentence murder cases.
And I noticed that you also handle people with marijuana cases.
I certainly do.
And can you explain that?
Yeah, well, actually, it's not just people with marijuana cases.
Okay.
So your listeners are obviously probably aware that the state of marijuana compliance right now in Massachusetts is it's legal.
Right.
Although it's still ill-defined and there's kind of issues
there's a lot of issues
that are still cropping up all the time in the judicial system. Well, before that, it was medical. Before that, it was decriminalized. And so when marijuana became decriminalized via Article 12 in late 2011, early 2012, I jumped into the industry. Not only representing individuals charged, defendants charged with possession to intent,
Right.
everything across the board with marijuana, but I also started representing businesses. And in that capacity, I was one of two founders of Canacare Docs. Canacare Docs is actually the largest medical marijuana evaluation facility in the country.
Okay.
We sold that in December 2017, and since then have really kind of been shifting gears and focusing more on these opportunities now.
Okay.
But like I said, I got really involved in the marijuana industry because even though it's recreational right now, Tamisha, I've represented, like I said before, addicts for a very, very long time. And I know how they're given the Vivitrol or the methadone, which is another reason that the people recidivate and come right back into the system, because methadone doesn't solve a thing. It's horrible. It delays the draw, the strain, the addiction. It delays it, but then it comes on 10 times worse.
Yes,
it's like getting shot with an EpiPen if you're allergic to bees.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it does. So marijuana, on the flip side, can I just say it? I trust Mother Nature, plants, a heck of a lot more than I trust the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And marijuana, I have seen over and over and over help people break the addiction to pills, to needles. And I'm not pretending this is an end-all, be-all, but to have people violated in probationary situations for testing positive for THC while they are a drug addict and fighting with everything in their being to break this addiction. Marijuana will never result in a probationary violation. We will never seek, under my administration, we'll never seek testing for THC while people are breaking the addiction. I am an incredibly strong proponent of the medical benefits of cannabis. And like I said, the fact that it's legal now, terrific, but I have seen firsthand the benefits that medical cannabis can how it can be used and how it can help addicts break the cycle.
Okay, and you're the only candidate that supports the harm reduction zone. Can you tell us
I am.
why and a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I am an incredibly strong proponent of harm reduction zones. Like I said, I'm running because I see the way the addiction epidemic is being dealt with in Suffolk County, not just across the country. Right? Harm reduction zones it's a mechanism put in place that creates an alternative towards prosecution of addicts. And what it means specifically, listen, if you tell an addict, don't shoot up, I mean, that's like, it's I almost want to laugh at how silly it is, because that's not going to work. People are not going to break their addiction unless they want to break it. Right. The court is not going to force them out. So let me tell you what a harm reduction zone is specifically. It's a predetermined location that is staffed with medical professionals, nurses, etc. So the individual, and the idea behind harm reduction zones is to get dirty needles off the street, protect officers. Those are two of the overarching reasons. And most importantly, it's going to help addicts break the cycle of addiction, and it's going to reduce the amount of overdoses. So it's a safe place where these people can go. We know they're going to shoot up anyway, so we get the needles off the street. They go to this location, they have a clean needle. While they're there, they're met with medical professionals, and they are offered material, suggestions, a ride to an addiction center, anything whatsoever. But now all of a sudden, the overdose rate drastically decreases. This is not a thought or a guess. This is empirical evidence. This is happening overseas, and it's happening in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's just looked at like taboo right now. And let me, if I may, briefly go down this rabbit hole, Tamisha. One of the biggest visceral reactions I hear from opponents of harm reduction zones is, no way, not my tax dollar. I'm not paying for these losers to shoot right up. I hear that every day. Now, if you look at, again, I understand that perspective, and we're all entitled to express our opinion respectfully. Now, if I may, let's look at this from a financial standpoint, because morally it's the right thing to do. These people need help. But let's look at it from a financial standpoint, because if it doesn't make sense financially, Tamisha, it's not going to go the distance, and it's not going to last. From a financial standpoint, we talked before about how these people go into the system, and what I mean by the system is becoming incarcerated. Right? It costs over $47,000 per year to incarcerate someone. And again, if that solved the problem, So be it. Our tax dollars done. $47 and we solve the problem. But it doesn't. These people get out and they're no longer working, which means they're on the government dole, right? They're on the system and they repeat and they end up back in the system. And it goes on and on and on. If you took a fraction of the cost used to incarcerate someone and reallocated that money towards treatment, I mean, that is how you proactively kill the cycle. That's how you address the problem head on and solve it.
Okay, so would you be collaborating with any other agencies after, hypothetically speaking, if someone was to catch a case for drugs? Okay, what would you have in place as far as getting them the counseling to work with the district attorney's office so that you can have some type of goal?
Absolutely. Well, the goal overall, remember that my number one goal of district attorney, I'm not a bleeding heart. I'm here to solve problems. But number one goal of the district attorney, my goal is to keep the public safe. Number one goal. Now, part of that entails getting addicts the treatment that they need because we don't want them to recidivate and repeat criminal actions. Now, how do we help them? Every individual, before they get arraigned, because once they are arraigned, they start going down this cycle over and over, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So they are triaged. The same way if someone was having a heart attack, the same way if someone was having a stroke, they would receive medical treatment. In the legal system, there's no such treatment available. They have something called the Section 12, which is, it's
where you can get section if you have a problem.
Well, you get section if you have a problem, but you probably end up there between 3 and 5 days, maybe 20 on the absolute outsides, and it doesn't solve anything.
It doesn't solve, and you can check yourself out.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, before someone is arraigned, they are assessed. They are triaged. And I use that term triage loosely because right now, they only have diversionary programs in Suffolk County for juveniles. So they will be triaged to see under the new diversionary program that I will incorporate immediately for young adults. I say young men, but young adults.
You'll explain to us what that plan would be, correct?
Absolutely. So if someone, again, non-violent, I draw a line between violent and non-violent. There is a world of difference. If someone is violent, they don't get any mercy. If someone is non-violent and they are an addict, they are receiving treatment whenever possible. So a triage would be incorporated, whether it be 18 through 25 or 18 through 26. Again, the number is kind of arbitrary right now. That would be part of the 5-person panel commission that I would use and seek the general consensus. What is the appropriate number? But again, I consider that very fluid. The overarching objective is to preclude individuals from going into the system. People that are not in the system, they can pay taxes, they can contribute, they can have a job, they can be an upstanding father, son, daughter, mother. People that are in the system, because of this hardline approach to the tough on war, the tough on drugs, that does not solve the system. I think it was Einstein who said, isn't it insanity repeating the same behavior yet expecting a different result? Now, does anyone actually think the drug epidemic, that problem is being solved via incarceration?
No.
Well, again, this is why I'm incorporating harm reduction zones. And to be candid, Tamisha, I'm actually shocked I'm the only one advocating for this.
Well, we're happy that you're here to explain where you stand on that.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about the criminal justice reform? Talk to us about that.
Well, I think criminal justice reform is such an incredibly broad topic, but it entails bail reform. And just so some of your listeners who may not be aware, the purpose of bail is to ensure an individual complies with court orders to come back to court. Bail, for someone like me, for someone like you, for people that have the means, the financial mechanisms, the idea of facing your case, your open case for drugs, for example, for marijuana, heroin, or anything in between, if we were arrested, we'd post that bail and we'd get some incredibly aggressive attorney, like myself, that would fight these cases, but you would be outside. You'd be going about your business. You'd be living on the street, going to your job, being with your spouse, taking care of your kids. That's not how it works for most people. Most people that are in the system can't afford $100, never mind $10,000. And so they're put into a system. This is part of the criminal justice reform, right? Part of the criminal justice reform platform, excuse me. They're put into the system where they can't post that bail. So on the first court date, 45 days, maybe 60 days after they are charged, They're back in court. They've been locked up for 2 months, and all of a sudden they're in a state of they're in a mental state where they are much more incentivized to plea out the case for a resolution that is horrible compared to what their counterpart would receive, who is facing the charge from the outside. And now, if you can imagine now, these two individuals, right, a young black guy and a young white guy, right? Now, the white guy can beat it because he's fighting it from the outside. The guy from the hood, he can't because he takes a plea from jail to get out. And now the next time this pattern repeats, it gets worse and worse and worse. And this is one small component of why the cycle repeats itself. It goes on and on and on. Now that's one part, bail reform. I actually think marijuana reform, marijuana to a small part is part of, I think it's actually emblematic, so to speak, of criminal justice reform because, like I said before, I feel THC is an exit drug. I feel very, very strongly. And stopping individuals that are trying to break the cycle from using THC or CBD, more importantly, I think is insanity. Other parts of criminal justice reform, again, it's an incredibly broad topic, but I can tell you that my administration, anytime there's an allegation that law enforcement acts outside the bounds of law within Suffolk County, it is not something that we would actually handle, it's not something that we'd actually have one of my prosecutors in Suffolk County handle. Just like let me kind of explain this a little bit more if I may.
Yes, you can.
So, like any corporate position or medical position or, cooking, any kind of position whatsoever, these individuals that are in a kitchen together, at a hospital together, at a corporate environment together, they socialize, they know each other's kids, they know each other's background, what their story is. So if you're actually having someone from the same social circle prosecute someone that they already have a rapport or a relationship with, and that is absolutely disastrous. It is absolutely there's no trust right now between law enforcement and the communities, the lower socioeconomic communities in Suffolk County. There's no trust. And part of the reason this trust one of many ways that this trust can be improved is by having out-of-county prosecutors, whether they be from Worcester, Cape and the Islands, or Springfield, it doesn't matter, but come in and handle cases where law enforcement from Suffolk County is actually the suspect or the alleged in such a situation.
Well, through my experience working for the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, I've heard a lot from victims or people who come into court, and it's a wonderful place to work, but I think one of the reasons is lack of prosecutors that look like themselves. And what would you be doing in order to help diversity as far as when people come in to the courtroom and they see prosecutors, what are you going to be doing as far as when it comes to diversity?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. They can't all be white guys, which the overwhelming majority of the staff right now is. I would actually, I know what my skill set is, and actually managing people is a very good one. But I actually bring on a group of individuals that would be responsible for hiring a much more diverse group. That actually segues.
Because I think it's all over the Suffolk County, whether it's from Worcester, it's just, I don't see.
That are prosecuting minorities.
You can say that.
Well, that's what I see. Like I said, I've been a defense attorney. I practice all over the state. I've seen the good in Bristol County. I've seen the bad in Bristol County. I've seen the good in Plymouth County, the bad in Plymouth County. I've seen, in Worcester, in Suffolk County, in the Cape and Islands. I've been practicing as a defense attorney in courts all around the state for 10 years. I have an office in downtown Boston. I have an office in Brockton. Right. I'm not just going to be coming in as one of the boys, so to speak, into Suffolk County. Hey, no, that's not my style. That's not who I am. That's not my background. I'm coming in having seen what works and what doesn't work. Right. And when people are just, to be totally candid, a little bit too scared politically to say, hey, this actually is a problem that can be addressed like this and proactively solve it. But politically, it's, I don't want to go near. That's not the way I'm working. I see a problem. I want to go after it pragmatically. And right now, there's a major opportunity to shift, to decapitate the system the way it's currently being operated, change some of the mechanics, and really proactively address some of what I really consider societal problems. But again, they've been shoved down the throat of the criminal justice system. We have some problems. They need to be solved. We're taking the best of what each county has to offer.
That's good. Thank you. So right now what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and hear more from Michael Maloney.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in, Voice of Reason Boston. We have Mike Maloney, and we will continue our discussion about how important it is to have prosecutors from every different ethnic backgrounds to work so that people who's coming into the system know that there isn't just a disparity in regards to race.
Tamisha, we're speaking the same language here. Like I said, I'm an incredibly strong proponent of criminal justice reform. You can't have one group of people prosecuting another and expect that there will be blindly trust, ripple throughout the community. It's just not the way society works, not the way people work. Like I said, I'll be establishing a commission in addition to being charged with resentencing in egregiously long nonviolent drug convictions. They'll also be assisting and facilitating the hiring of a diverse group of individuals that is consistent with Chelsea, Revere, Winthrop, and all of Boston's community.
I think it's very important that you said that, because a lot of times when people come in, whether it's their first time in court from a silly mistake or hanging with the wrong people at the wrong time, and then they get convicted on drug charges, when they come in and they see even defense or prosecutor, they're all white, I almost think that immediately they think they're not going to get a fair chance.
Well, it's a human reaction, and I don't necessarily, listen, in some situations that's what really is happening. We talked about what happens with bail, I get it. I also realize that I'm a 38-year-old man and I'm white, so I realize that, there's some things that I can help solve, but there's also situations where I'm going to bring in a crew that is going to be responsible for help administering and tackling this task. But I'm telling you right from the get-go, you're not going to, I realize, like I said, I've been preaching criminal justice reform since I got on here. I realize the issues here, and more importantly, I realize that in order to solve these problems, the problems that we've listed out for the past half hour, 45 minutes, we need to have a more diverse backroom.
Yeah, and it's important to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, then it's a problem for us. And as long as...
Not only is it a problem, it perpetuates the problem.
Exactly, and I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight, but as long as we have a dialogue like we're having now, then that would give people the opportunity to see the things that we're talking about and want to make the change.
Bingo. Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about incarceration doesn't equal treatment. What is that all about?
Well, we talked, so listen, incarceration, unlike bail, which is strictly to ensure that someone just complies with the court order, comes back to court, incarceration actually has like a number of different variables or responsibilities, so to speak. It's certainly punitive to a certain extent, restitution to a certain extent, making the victims whole, keeping the community safe is by far and away the most important. But there also becomes a point where individuals have done their time and expressed remorse and are ready to contribute back to society.
Right.
But there becomes a point of negative returns. If you're incarcerating someone, for years or decades on end, and then you can't subsequently release them and expect there's not going to be some sort of ripple effects.
Right.
There becomes a point of negative returns. Like I said, my administration is focused on not like I said, we're prosecuting someone, but we're looking for ways to not incarcerate them. I don't want to incur that $47,000 charge every single time we put someone in. I would rather give them some sort of penalty and have them contribute to the community. Now, more importantly, like I said, I will not be prosecuting non-violent drug crimes. So immediately, some of the issues we just talked about a moment ago, Tamisha, that these charges are affecting minorities disproportionately more than they're affecting white people, right? Well, again, I'm not prosecuting non-violent drug crimes, so there's going to be a drastic reduction immediately in the amount of charges that are brought through the judicial system. Okay.
And do you think racial disparity, there's a problem in Boston for that?
Do I think there's a racial disparity in Boston?
In Boston, yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And
let's talk about it.
I think that was really the question there, right? Let's talk about it. There's a major racial, and actually, you probably saw, or maybe you've heard of some of the articles that have just come out recently talking about the conviction rate for white victims versus the conviction rate for
African Americans.
Yeah,
yes.
It's disparaging would be an enormous understatement. It's really unfortunate. But there's actually, it's not like you can point the problem at one single issue or point the I'm not going to point the problem with a finger straight at law enforcement because of that. It's a consequence of actions that have been taken over years, which clearly disproportionately affect the black and brown people. But here's what happens oftentimes. Law enforcement, when they, there's been a number of shootings, close to 30 in just the past few months alone. When there's a shooting, right, or when there's a murder, a stabbing, what have you, law enforcement goes to the scene, and a lot of times what is happening is people don't want to speak to them. Now, people don't want to speak to law enforcement because they don't trust them, like for the reason that we said before, because they're scared of the collateral consequences. But either way, these problems, like the other problems that we've addressed so far, they repeat and they occur over and over and over. So as opposed to someone speaking when there was a crime in Beacon Hill or Back Bay, witnesses are typically much more abundant. When you have a crime in Dorchester or Roxbury or Mattapan, victims are not as forthcoming more often than not.
Right, and I believe the reason for that is because when a victim comes forward, they're looking out for their safety. They're
Bingo.
looking out for what, if I tell you this, are you going to able to protect my family from anything from
A
happening
very
to me?
legitimate concern.
And housing is a big issue in Boston. Where are we going to place the victims for protection if they come forward? I think it's all about having a preparation. It's all about having a plan set for victims who come forward. These are the things that we can do for you to protect you, but you have to come and talk to us about what you saw.
We have to have housing for victims, housing that can be under the protection of surveillance of law, under law enforcement, protected. Literally, I agree. We also need more cameras in the streets of various parts of more centralized, crime-ridden areas. We need more cameras in the streets. Right now, law enforcement is relying primarily on business cameras. Something at a CVS or a Rite Aid or a Walmart. But I can tell you oftentimes that those cameras aren't even functional. They're pointing the wrong direction. We need more cameras in the streets. We need more gun triangulation sound points. You're absolutely right that we need more housing for victims as well. And I can say we need, but actually you want me to talk about some creative solutions. There's actually a seldom used tool of not just Dan Conley's administration, but any administration throughout the county. It's called an accord and satisfaction. An accord and satisfaction is a way of resolving cases without actually, it essentially terminates the prosecution and resolves the case oftentimes with some sort of civil associated variable, whatever that civil, some sort of community service or court cost, that kind of thing. Well, like I said, non-violent drug offenses, I am not prosecuting. I am taking a very drastic line here because you cannot incarcerate your way out of this problem. But what I will do is I will offer accord and satisfactions. Again, a legal tool seldom used in this state, but I will use accord and satisfactions to have people that have been charged or have open cases in Suffolk County. I will use that to extract significant sources of revenue and use that to initiate, fund, create these shelters for victims. 9 times out of 10, these victims being women, if it's a domestic, in various parts, or victims or witnesses of horrible crimes. Again, we cannot incarcerate our way out of the problem. Right now, there are hundreds of open cases in this county. If we were to offer some of these individuals, I'm not saying across the board, and I'm certainly not talking about violent offenders, but I'm talking about non-violent offenders who are liquid. And what I'm saying is, much rather than throw them in jail and have them repeat the cycle, I will offer them an opportunity called an accord and satisfaction. And with significant financial contribution, they will not be charged, and that is how we will fund these initiatives.
Do you think that would help drastically?
Enormously.
Okay.
Enormously.
All right. Okay, that's good to know. And what makes you different from all the candidates that are currently running right now?
Well, like I said, I'm the only independent running. I'm the only individual that is in full support of harm reduction zones.
Okay.
I am not only do I have, again, the district attorney's position is not just about practicing law, right? But I've been practicing law for about 10 years. It's also about running the office, which consists of several hundred individuals. Many of them are very strong-willed attorneys. Well, I can tell you, I built, like I talked before, Candidate Docs when I started that company in 2012. From the ground up, Zero, no employees. When we sold it in December of 2017, I had 183 employees. I currently have another alternative wellness company called CBD Thera. I employ a number of addicts, and I feel that they actually offer some of the most enormous benefits to my company. I have a legal background and a business background. I am an independent. I'm in charge. I am supportive of harm reduction zones. My job is to solve problems. The government does not solve your problems. The government does not solve your problems. The private sector is leading the way in regards to addressing a problem head on. What is the solution? What needs to happen? That's the approach I'm bringing in. I'm not beholden to a Democratic Party, a Republican Party. I'm beholden to the well-being and safety of the constituents in Suffolk County.
Excellent. And what are your ties to the community?
I'm very engrossed in. This is a really stressful job. It is.
Very stressful.
Very stressful job. So I do Bikram yoga 7 days a week. I actually did it again this morning.
Wow.
There's a great studio in Back Bay. There's a great studio in Dedham. There's a great studio in Cambridge. I've been doing it for about 3.5 years, 7 days a week. It has positive ripple effects on every aspect of my life. I feel like $1 million, thinking clearly. I'm very involved with the community, with a lot of social get-togethers, a couple of retreats now and again. So it's probably the biggest tie-in in Boston. I've been doing it for a long time, and I'm, like I said, it allows me to think clearly after dealing with all these issues day in, day out, day in, day out.
Well, Mike, you're doing a wonderful job. And can you just give people who are tuning in your website, social media, where they can learn more about you?
I certainly can. Thank you. And again, Tamisha, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here, let people know what my platform is, and get to know you better. My name is Michael Maloney. I'm the only independent in the race. I will be on the ballot, on the November ballot. My website, dasuffolkcounty.com. I've been practicing criminal law for 10 years. I'm a business owner in Massachusetts. Ties up and down. From Suffolk to Bristol, from Cape and the Islands to Springfield. I'm very excited to proactively address these problems and ensure the safety and the well-being of your Suffolk constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those who are tuning in and listening in, thank you for all your support. Thank you for letting us know what you would like to hear. And September 4th is the time to vote. I've been able to have the opportunity to bring all kinds of candidates to come in to tell about themselves and why they're running in, but it is up to you. If you want change in your community, it's all about you and what you would like to see done. You have to vote. Oftentimes we can be our own worst enemy. We can ask for change, but we don't make the change.
But you don't go to the ballot.
And you don't go to the ballot. So please vote September 4th. We will also be having one more candidate to come in, and she will be giving you more information about herself. But please go and vote. Learn about the candidates. See which one provides the kind of help for your community that you like, and go vote. And we thank you again for listening to Voice of Reason Boston. If you have any questions for me, please email me at voiceofreasonboston@gmail.com. And you can check out our Facebook page, follow us, give us all your questions and all your comments. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.